Well, thank you very much for inviting me to give these remarks. You've invited me here at a very good moment for the Washington Post. We're on a promising path, and I believe most who work in our organization feel that way. We feel energized, we feel motivated, we feel encouraged, hopeful, we see opportunities, and we are excited to be able to experiment while doing journalism that makes a difference. We face the same challenges as everyone here. We do not have all the answers, but we do feel that our organization has the qualities that will allow us to find them. I'm telling you this with full recognition that new technologies, new platforms, and the accelerating pace of change place formidable demands on all of us. I am telling you this also with profound concern that the media environment has been poisoned by digital outlets that spread falsehoods and dangerous conspiracy theories. Their aim is to promote preferred ideologies and political interests, to undermine confidence in traditional media, and even to sabotage an array of other institutions that have been pillars of democracy. And I tell you this when, in the United States, we have a president who has displayed an aggressive hostility toward the mainstream press. He is deploying the powers of his office to weaken us, hoping to inoculate himself from criticism and anoint his administration and its allies as the sole source of real news. I did not say things were easy. They are not. They will be difficult. But difficult is not the same as impossible. There is a quote I like, and it comes from the winner of a Nobel Peace Prize, Dr. Bernard Lown, who was awarded that honor in 1985. He was a founder of International Physicians for Peace and was an advocate of a continued moratorium on nuclear testing. Here's what he said: "Only those who see the invisible can do the impossible." The point is this: what seems impossible is possible, and what today is not visible can be imagined, can be pursued, can even be achieved, and the effort gives us purpose. There is a lot of work to do, and I'd like to talk about how we at the Post are trying to do it. And then I'll talk about the other challenges that have come our way, from the US president's venom to media outlets that promote falsehoods and crackpot conspiracies. Let me start at the beginning of the new era at the Post, October 1, 2013, when we were acquired by Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon. Shortly after we were purchased, a handful of senior Post executives traveled to Seattle to meet with Jeff. We spent the day discussing a wide range of subjects. And then we were invited to a restaurant with a magnificent cliffside view of Seattle's Lake Union. As we were served drinks, a brilliant rainbow appeared over the lake. We ran over to look and to take photos. And then a second rainbow appeared. This was a double rainbow. And we all declared that this was a good sign for the Post and for Jeff's ownership. And as it turns out, it really was. Our gains have not come at the expense of quality journalism. Our goals at the Post have been the following: make rapid digital progress, that's number one, and number two, deliver ambitious journalism. We don't accept the idea that we can't do both at the same time. We believe we can, and we believe we must. We can be smart while also having popular appeal. We don't have to be stuffy to take on serious subjects. Our storytelling can be tailored to the way people consume information today, even as we remain true to our traditions and our values and our mission. Jeff's acquisition of the Post was announced 6 months after I arrived in Washington from the Boston Globe in January of 2013. The Graham family, owners of the Post for 8 decades, were revered, and rightly so. The family built the brand. They championed top-notch, tough, and lyrical journalism. The Post's coverage had changed the course of American history. But as Washington Post Company CEO Don Graham said at the time of the sale, he and other executives were running out of ideas for turning around the Post. Don felt we needed someone who could bring ideas and expertise that we ourselves did not possess. In Jeff, we were getting an owner who was expert in technology. We also got someone who was savvy about consumer behavior. He brought financial capital, but at least as important, he brought intellectual capital. From the very start, Jeff reoriented the strategy at the Post. Our approach previously had been summarized in one phrase: for and about Washington. In short, a strategy for covering our region. But Jeff felt we should be national and even international, and that we needed to get big fast. The internet had robbed our industry of so much. The security that came because it was so expensive for competitors to get in the business. Advertising that once had come our way because there were few good alternatives. The readers who came to us because information we published was not readily available elsewhere. But Jeff noted that the internet has also given us some gifts. In particular, the opportunity to achieve wide distribution at virtually no cost. If we were hurt by what the internet had taken from us, why should not we seize the benefits the internet had to offer? For the Post, with its history and its brand, the opportunity was ours to grasp. The Post was widely known. Our products could be leveraged to a national and global scale. Jeff spoke immediately about the need for us to experiment, to try a lot of different things, to move quickly, and to adapt to what we were learning. At the same time, he promised to give us, quote, runway, or time needed to let experiments prove or disprove themselves. Jeff had a well-established reputation for thinking long-term. At the Post, he lived up to that reputation. What Jeff expected of us was to be open to new journalistic approaches. We could be faithful to our values, but we could not be wedded to industry conventions. The unconventional might be uncomfortable, but our comfort wasn't anything he seemed to care about, or really should have. One fundamental shift we had to make was in our attitude toward aggregation. That is, relying on other people's reporting as one foundation for our stories. Not the only one, but certainly one foundation, rather than mandating that we had to do all the reporting ourselves. Aggregation meant that we could write stories more quickly and write about more subjects. Also, of course, we could only depend on publications with a history of reliability and high standards. Unsurprisingly, aggregation met with some anxiety in our newsroom, but it went more smoothly than I anticipated. That was a signal that we could work through our deepest anxieties and make some real changes in the way we practiced our craft. Let me run through some of the initiatives that followed. We created an overnight staff that scanned the web for interesting stories, using the reporting of others and adding its own, and then writing in a distinct, looser, and conversational style that works especially well on the web. It also looked for gaps in our own coverage for the next day's paper and filled them. What could be done tonight that in the past would have been done as a second-day story or a third-day story? We introduced new blogs covering specialized areas like the environment, science, military affairs, the culture of the internet, parenting, spiritual life, pop culture, the animal world, crime, and other subjects. Extra resources were provided for pre-existing blogs that already had been highly successful, including ones that focused on politics, economics, public policy, and world affairs. We also launched Post Everything, a venue for essays, often personal narratives written in the moment. This was not a place for wonky public policy experts. In contrast, we published many pieces by ordinary people who opened up about their life experiences. We created a general assignment news team that worked during daytime hours, starting very early. It would quickly cover breaking news in any subject area when necessary, but it also would search for stories that were beginning to spark conversation in social media, or that had gone unnoticed by our staff or had gone underdeveloped by other news organizations. With this team, there will be no hour of the day or night that goes unstaffed with a reporter. No more dead zones, as we call them. We modeled what we determined was the ideal flow for publishing stories, mandating that every department publish earlier in the day when internet readership was at its highest. This marked a sharp shift away from typical schedules of a newspaper, where most stories are delivered during the evening hours. We monitor our copy flow against the ideal model. We have automated messages that remind reporters when stories are due or are late. We paid close attention to our headlines. They could not be stilted or stuffy or clumsy like so many newspaper headlines. Of course, they needed to be accurate, they needed to be responsible, but they had to be written in a plain and snappy and alluring language. They needed to succeed in the world of social media. And let me say this is not clickbait. It's just good headline writing. I've often been asked how you get people to read more than headlines. My answer is this: write a good headline. They will want to read more. We have taken other measures too. We have added to our news team focused on audience engagement, the people who specialize in how to disseminate our work through social media and how to use social media in our own reporting. We are concentrating not just on Facebook and Twitter and Google, but on other less obvious corners of social media. Our aim is to be everywhere, to go wherever people are consuming news and information. This year, we launched the Washington Post in the Discover channel of Snapchat. We are now looking hard at how we can participate more fully in Amazon Echo and Google Home, and subsequently Apple's new device. New platforms require us not only to move quickly, but also to think differently about how we deliver news and information. These are not just distribution channels. We cannot just repurpose our existing work. Based on an intimate understanding of users, we must customize our journalism to each new platform. This is true in one of our biggest initiatives, video. The field of digital video is littered with failures, including our own. And yet in the past 2 years, we have seen extraordinary success. First, we got rid of shows of the type you might see on television. We also were more selective about the documentary-style videos we pursued, given how resource-intensive they are and their limited audience. We ensured that every story possible had a video with it. We emphasized news videos, live video, and videos that explain complex subjects in 2 minutes or less, often with animation. Video plays soared 139% last year, and due to that success and continuing high advertiser demand, we received approval to double the size of our video staff to about 60 people this year, our single largest newsroom investment in 2017. This year, we expect to produce more video that stands apart from stories published by the rest of the news staff. We will develop personalities on video and develop programming for over-the-top television, like Apple TV and Amazon Fire TV. We'll even try our hand at scripted humor on video. At the Post, we are constantly looking for positive surprises. That is, things that are doing well despite our inattention and against our expectations. For example, email newsletters were growing rapidly as a source of traffic, but that was not because we were doing a good job with them. In fact, we were doing a poor job. So we started paying attention, assuring that someone in the newsroom took ownership of every single newsletter, improving designs, calibrating the best time to send each newsletter, adding newsletters that we thought would have appeal, discontinuing others. We have markedly improved our email newsletters. They can be a major source of traffic. And by the way, they circumvent intermediaries like Facebook, Twitter, and Google and allow us to reach readers directly. We have also focused on the speed of our news alerts, closely measuring to see how we compare with our competitors with the goal of always being first. Metrics like those we apply to news alerts are very much a part of our news operation. For example, early on, we began to measure how readers reacted to our stories versus those of our competitors. Using anonymized stories, we surveyed readers on which ones they found most appealing. Among the many moves we have made at the Post is to foster a tight working relationship between the newsroom and the engineering department. The engineers help us tell stories in new ways. They also work to make sure the stories that might interest readers find their way to their eyeballs automatically with recommendations generated by algorithms. In-house big data specialists dramatically improved our story recommendation lists, boosting the rate at which readers go on to a second or third story on the site. Engineers have designed a tool that allows us to test an unlimited number of headlines and presentations all at the same time. When one works best, it automatically becomes the approach that is viewed by everyone on our site. They also have developed a work process tool that allows us to keep better track of what stories are coming and when and how they should be featured on our digital platforms. Post journalism is now available on the desktop web, a mobile web product, 2 tabloid apps, 1 mobile app, dozens of newsletters, podcasts, video, Snapchat, voice-activated devices like Amazon Echo, and a new product oriented toward millennial women that recently made its debut on Medium. Everyone involved in those products needs a window into our journalism pipeline. When Jeff Bezos acquired the Post, the engineer's very first task was to dramatically improve the speed at which our web pages load. Readers are notoriously impatient. An additional second can cause them to go elsewhere. Our engineers succeeded to an astonishing degree. Last year, the Post announced a lightning-fast mobile website. As our Chief Technology Officer, Shailesh Prakash, said, our goal was to create the fastest mobile news site possible. The initiative relies on progressive web app technology from Google. The idea is to have web pages load in under a second versus 3 seconds previously. All of us in this field have been working harder, testing our limits. Now we have to work smarter, and technology is key. That is why the Post is evolving into a technology company, even as it remains a journalism company. What does that mean? At the most basic level, as our CTO likes to point out, it means that technologists are first-class citizens in our news organizations. They are not there merely to provide support to journalists or the ad department. And our engineers serve as a creative force that drives growth. Over the past year, we have become a vendor of news technology to other organizations. The suite of tools we sell is known as ARC, and we are excited about the industry's interest in what our engineers have developed. In March, Tronc, the owner of the Los Angeles Times and Chicago Tribune and many other newspapers, became our largest client. I hope you get the overall picture here. We are experimenting feverishly to drive traffic, deepen reader engagement, foster loyalty, boost subscriptions, and position ourselves as a technology leader. We are not aiming for a moonshot that will solve all of our problems at once. We're taking things step by step, often in ways that may not be dramatic, but that are effective. Perhaps you've heard this line before, but it's worth repeating here because it's instructive. We put a man on the moon before we put wheels on luggage. Wheels on luggage was not as exciting as the moonshot, but it did immediately and more tangibly change people's lives for the better. And it transformed an industry. Hardly anyone gets luggage without wheels now. Everyone bought new luggage. Our industry needs to think about our equivalent to wheels on luggage and develop those simple but powerfully effective ideas instead of dreaming endlessly of the moonshot that will rescue us. We also need to recognize, once and for all, that the internet constitutes an entirely new medium. This new medium calls for its own forms of storytelling, just as radio has its own, just as television has its own. And in truth, there are many new mediums: Snapchat, Amazon Echo, podcasts. Each of those is a new medium. Each requires its own distinct way of telling stories. We're seeing this happen. Novel forms of storytelling are being introduced. They are more conversational, more accessible, looser in style. At times, more or mostly visual. They deploy all the tools now available to us: video, audio, social media, interactive graphics, animations, original documents. The voice and personality of writers is often more evident. It feels more authentic. It is more authentic. But there is something that doesn't change in our business, and that is our mission. There is a quote from Jeff Bezos on one of the glass partitions in our new DC offices, and it goes like this: "I strongly believe that missionaries make better products. They care more. For a missionary, it's not just about the business. There has to be a business, and the business has to make sense. But that's not why you do it. You do it because you have something meaningful that motivates you." All true journalists have something meaningful that motivates them. Some call it our brand. I call it our soul, and it is our compass. At the center of our mission is journalism that holds powerful institutions and powerful individuals accountable. I hope the current U.S. president understands that. It's not evident yet that he does. During the presidential campaign, Donald Trump made attacks on the press a centerpiece of his strategy for getting elected, and he appears to be making it a centerpiece of his strategy for governance. He first described the press as disgusting, scum, lowlifes, and when those insults were not enough, he called journalists the lowest form of humanity. That too was not enough, so he called us the lowest form of life itself. Trump has suggested that he would routinely torment unfriendly media outlets by suing them, driving up their legal expenses and subjecting them to severe penalties. With respect to the Washington Post, he ordered our press credentials revoked for months during the primary campaign, and then for a while into the general election, barring us from routine press access to him and his events because our coverage did not meet with his approval. He also falsely made menacing threats against our owner, Jeff Bezos, because of Post coverage that Jeff had no hand in. Trump has escalated his attacks on the press while in the White House. Several commentators have already begun to astutely diagnose what he is trying to accomplish. As journalist John Cassidy wrote in The New Yorker, "The aim is to portray the media as a political adversary rather than an independent monitor, so that when damaging stories appear, the administration can dismiss them." Only 4 weeks into the administration, Trump labeled the mainstream media the enemy of the American people. Our goal as a news organization is to be honest, honorable, accurate, fair, forthright, and independent. On the other hand, what has the president said? When the president appeared in late January at the CIA immediately after his inauguration, he declared, "I have a running war with the media." Now, the president may be at war, but the Washington Post is not. We are at work. We are just trying to do our jobs. Many journalists wonder what it is going to be like for us during the 4 or perhaps 8 years of this administration. Will we be incessantly harassed and vilified? Will we face obstruction at every turn? And if so, what do we do? The answer, I believe, is pretty simple. Just do our job. Do it as it's supposed to be done. The public expects that of us. If we fail to pursue the truth and to tell it unflinchingly, the public will not forgive us. Nor, in my view, should they. What we are seeing, in fact, is that readers are eager for us to hold government to account. Investigative reporting involving politicians, including and especially our president, has been at the heart of a surge in subscriptions at the Post and at other news organizations. We now know that there is a business case in addition to the moral case for investigative journalism. You might wonder whether the Post's emphasis on innovation and digital traffic and metrics is conducive to deep investigations that can be expensive and time-consuming. The subject of investigative reporting and metrics came up with Jeff Bezos at an employee town hall in January of 2016, which preceded any real expectation of a Trump presidency. Jeff was asked how important metrics were in his view and what impact they might have on the journalism we practice. He said metrics were important. Only really bad business people ignore them. He said you have to make sure you're measuring the right things. He also said some things are so hard to measure that you have to use gut feel and intuition. He said that there are, and I'm quoting here, principles that you care so much about that even if the metrics told you to do the opposite, you'd still do what your principles tell you to do. And in elaborating, he cited what he called our deepest mission. He imagined how someone might say one day that the big, long, 6-month investigative stories don't pay off. They just don't pencil out, so let's stop doing them. If I saw that study, he concluded, and the numbers showed that, I would say, I just don't believe it. And I think that 20 years from now, we would regret believing that study. So principles trump metrics. It's already apparent that this administration is going to do everything it can to obstruct reporting on substantive matters. In doing so, it is not just obstructing the press, but also the public, which is entitled to know what its government is up to. As James Hohmann, author of the Post political newsletter, The Daily 202, put it, Donald Trump appears to have made a cynical calculation that he will not pay a high political price for being the most secretive president since Richard Nixon. All the leaks about infighting among senior staff and the president's proclivity for tweeting have created a false sense that the public knows what is happening inside his White House. In fact, the administration has gone to great lengths to conceal pertinent information from the American public. The administration has declared that it will not voluntarily release the names of visitors to the White House, as the Obama administration had done. Trump decided not to release his tax returns, defying decades of practice and denying the public insight into potential conflicts of interest and how his policies might affect his personal wealth. And the Washington Post disclosed after the FBI director was fired in May that the White House had been putting pressure on the FBI to more aggressively pursue leak investigations, even on matters that only embarrassed the administration and did not involve classified information. When it came to leaks of classified matters, the president seemed to have an appetite for putting journalists in jail. It's been pointed out lately that there's a huge difference between the way Trump and his staff talk about the press in public, fake news, disgusting, all of that, and how they treat members of the White House press in person. White House officials are often cordial, amiable, accessible, and even talkative in private. And the president certainly is more accessible than recent predecessors, regularly giving interviews even to outlets he routinely criticizes. I would argue, however, that his public position is far more important than the private interactions. His objective is to undermine the credibility and standing of the press, to call into question its independent reporting. And there are disturbing signs that he is having some success. Republican voters agree by a stunning 81% to 17% that certain news organizations are the enemy of the American people, according to a recent poll. And 36% of Republicans, another poll shows, believe press freedom can do more harm than good. Fortunately, most Americans disagree with those attitudes. We can be grateful for that because we fully intend to do that kind of reporting. We now confront a challenge that's far more formidable than a president who is so aggressively hostile toward the mainstream press. That is the spread of deliberate falsehoods and conspiracy theories by new media outlets, the real fake news, not what the president calls fake news. The result? People believe a lot that is plainly untrue. Many people, and it is having a corrosive effect. How can we have a strong civil society when we can't agree on basic facts? How can we have a functioning democracy when people accept lies as fact? For all the challenges we face in media today, there is none greater than this one, in my view. Will legitimate journalism compete successfully against lies that are disseminated at breathtaking speed through social media? As of today, we do not know. And what do we do about all this? That, too, is hard to say. I am very supportive of recent efforts to promote news literacy before young people get to college. New programs for high schools and middle schools are showing promise at helping young people develop critical thinking skills to evaluate news sources. We need more of those programs, and we need them to be incorporated at a faster pace in schools. We will also need to change some of our own ways. We will have to give people greater insight into how we do our work, how we've arrived at our own conclusions. Readers will need to know more about our experience and our expertise. We'll have to publish original documents. We will have to publish full text of interviews or full recordings. We may have to annotate our stories with sources of information. We'll have to be more open with readers regarding what we know, how we know it, what we don't know, and what we're still trying to find out. David Farenthold of the Washington Post did that in his investigation of Trump's charitable activities, or lack thereof, which won a Pulitzer Prize this past year. He invited the public to help in his investigation, photographing his notes and displaying them on Twitter, asking the public for people or organizations he should interview, soliciting people's help in assembling pieces of the journalistic puzzle. In accepting an award this year, David talked about that. And he said, beyond the age-old requirements that we be right and that we be fair and that we be clear, there is a requirement that we be transparent. We owe them proof of why what we do is better. If they don't know it from our name, they must see it from our work. Today's environment has challenged our business in so many ways. Now it will require us to develop a new relationship with the public. That's all we needed. One more challenge. But it is one more challenge we will have to meet. Thank you for listening.